If this message finds you during a period when everything feels heavy, your emotions, your thoughts, your body, your very existence, it's because your consciousness has reached a saturation point where ordinary coping mechanisms can no longer provide the lightness you need. The weight you're carrying isn't just emotional burden or physical fatigue, it's energetic density that accumulates when consciousness identifies with limitation rather than recognizing its naturally light and spacious essence. This quantum healing practice operates through what energy workers call vibrational release. But what they don't understand is that true lightness doesn't come through energy manipulation or clearing techniques. It emerges when consciousness recognizes heaviness as temporary density in the vast space of aware presence that remains naturally light regardless of what emotional or energetic content might be moving through it. The synchronicity that brought you to this understanding means your awareness has evolved beyond trying to manage heavy feelings and toward recognizing the naturally light essence that contains all experience without being weighed down by any of it. Your system has been preparing for this recognition through every moment of feeling overwhelmed by life's density, developing the sensitivity needed to access the weightless space that exists within every heavy experience. Something in the healing intelligence of the universe recognized that you're ready for the practice that doesn't just provide temporary relief from heaviness, but reveals the naturally light awareness that cannot actually be burdened by any emotional, mental, or energetic content. This isn't another energy clearing technique. This is recognition of how consciousness can observe heaviness without resistance while maintaining its inherent lightness. Right now, even if heavy feelings are present, can you sense the awareness that observes whatever density might be occurring? There's a part of you that remains completely light even when emotions feel heavy or thoughts seem burdensome. This naturally light consciousness is the key to quantum healing that transforms heaviness from suffering into temporary weather patterns that pass through awareness naturally. You've been receiving glimpses of this lightness during moments when heavy feelings suddenly lift without effort, haven't you? Brief experiences of profound relief that emerge when you stop fighting the density, demonstrating that lightness isn't something you create through clearing heavy content, but something you access through recognizing what remains unchanged by any energetic experience. The reason this quantum healing practice is emerging now isn't accidental. Every period of heaviness has been calibrating your consciousness to appreciate the profound relief that becomes available when naturally light awareness stabilizes as your primary identity rather than something you occasionally access between periods of emotional or energetic density. The heaviness feels like it permeates every aspect of your experience, doesn't it? It's not just emotional weight from difficult relationships or life circumstances. It's a density that seems to have settled into your body, your thoughts, your energy field, creating the sensation that you're moving through life with invisible weights attached to your being. You've probably noticed that this heaviness isn't always correlated with external circumstances. Sometimes you feel weighted down even when life conditions are relatively stable, while other times you maintain lightness despite genuine challenges. This disconnect suggests that heaviness operates at energetic levels that transcend logical cause and effect relationships. Your body feels the weight in specific ways, a sensation of gravity pulling more strongly than usual, fatigue that sleep doesn't resolve, or the feeling that simple activities require enormous effort. Movement feels labored, breathing seems shallow, and there's often a sense that you're carrying burdens that belong to others or situations beyond your control. The emotional component of heaviness often includes feelings that seem too large for your individual system to process. Grief that feels oceanic, worry that extends beyond personal concerns to include global suffering, or empathy that absorbs the pain of everyone in your environment. You might feel like an emotional sponge that has absorbed more than it can naturally release. Mental heaviness manifests as thoughts that feel dense and repetitive. Mental fog that makes clarity difficult to access. or the sense that your mind is operating through thick, viscous medium rather than flowing freely. Decision-making becomes exhausting because every choice feels weighted with excessive significance or consequence. You've likely tried various approaches to lighten this density: meditation, exercise, energy healing, therapy, time in nature, with mixed results. Some practices provide temporary relief, but the underlying pattern of heaviness seems to reassert itself, especially during periods of stress or when you're processing difficult emotions or life transitions. The heaviness often feels like it accumulates over time rather than arising suddenly, as if you're gradually collecting energetic debris from daily life that your system doesn't know how to release naturally. Past traumas, unprocessed emotions, absorbed energy from others, or simply the weight of adult responsibilities seems to create layers of density. Perhaps most challenging is how heaviness affects your natural joy and spontaneity. Activities that used to feel light and enjoyable now seem to require effort. Laughter feels forced, play seems frivolous, and there's often a sense that you've forgotten how to access the natural lightness that characterized earlier periods of your life. The isolation that heaviness creates can be profound, as the internal experience is difficult to communicate to others who haven't experienced similar density. Well-meaning suggestions to lighten up or let it go miss the involuntary nature of energetic accumulation and can create additional shame about your inability to simply choose lightness. Every period of feeling heavy, every experience of emotional or energetic density, every moment when life seemed to weigh more than you could gracefully carry, has been preparing your consciousness for this recognition that heaviness isn't evidence of personal burden. It's awareness temporarily forgetting its naturally light essence while developing the sensitivity needed to access unshakable inner lightness. The frustration you've felt with clearing techniques that provide temporary relief but don't prevent heaviness from returning tells a perfect story of preparation for lasting transformation. Energy work that helped briefly was teaching you to distinguish between imposed lightness and natural weightlessness. Emotional processing methods that worked initially were demonstrating that releasing heavy content can't create the spaciousness that remains naturally light, regardless of what passes through it. Think of how a balloon filled with helium naturally rises, despite any temporary weights that might be attached to it. Your journey through heavy experiences has been developing the understanding that authentic lightness comes from recognizing the awareness that remains naturally buoyant regardless of emotional weather, rather than trying to eliminate all sources of density. Every attempt to clear heaviness through effort or technique was preparing you to understand that lasting lightness emerges when consciousness stops fighting against heavy feelings and starts recognizing the naturally light presence that contains all experience without being weighed down by any of it. The exhaustion from trying to maintain lightness through effort was consciousness calling your attention to the effortless weightlessness available through recognition rather than management. The timing of your heaviest experiences corresponds perfectly with periods when your sensitivity was developing enough to eventually appreciate the profound relief available through quantum healing. What seemed like accumulating density was actually consciousness building the contrast needed to recognize authentic lightness when it stabilizes as your natural state. Your energetic system has been like a filter, gradually learning to distinguish between the weight of absorbed content and the weightless space that contains all content. The heavy emotions, the dense thoughts, the feeling of carrying burdens, all of it was preparation for recognizing the naturally light awareness that remains unburdened regardless of what moves through it. The resistance you felt toward accepting heaviness as a permanent aspect of your experience has been your deeper wisdom, recognizing that density isn't your true nature, but temporary identification with content that can be transcended through understanding rather than clearing. Even your concerns about whether sustainable lightness is possible, given your sensitivity to heavy emotions and energy, have been consciousness, ensuring that when quantum healing does occur, it will be based on genuine recognition rather than temporary technique that loses effectiveness when challenges arise. Something extraordinary is beginning to lighten in your entire being right now. Can you sense it? That subtle but unmistakable feeling of density beginning to dissolve, of your entire energetic field starting to remember its naturally weightless essence, of heaviness transforming from solid burden into transparent energy that passes through awareness without creating suffering. Your cellular structure is literally reorganizing as this recognition deepens. Areas of your body that have been holding tension, density, or absorbed emotions are beginning to release naturally as consciousness recognizes itself as the naturally light space in which all content appears and disappears without creating permanent weight or burden. The electromagnetic field around your entire being is shifting into patterns that support natural lightness rather than accumulated density. When your bioelectric field achieves coherence, it creates optimal conditions for the kind of effortless weightlessness that allows heavy content to be present without resistance, while maintaining the naturally light observer that remains unburdened by any experience. Your emotional body is beginning to remember its capacity for allowing feelings to flow through rather than accumulating as stored density. This shift creates the internal environment where emotions become temporary weather patterns rather than permanent atmospheric conditions that weigh down your entire system. Notice how your breathing is naturally becoming lighter and more spacious without conscious effort to change it. This is your respiratory system responding to the lightness activation that allows heaviness to be present without resistance, while accessing the weightless awareness that remains unchanged by any energetic content. But here's what's building in your consciousness that will completely transform your relationship to heaviness. The recognition that density isn't evidence of energetic burden. It's consciousness temporarily forgetting its naturally light essence, and now preparing to remember through the magnificent process of quantum healing, lightness activation. The reason this healing practice is becoming available now is because your awareness has developed enough sensitivity through heavy experiences to appreciate the profound relief that emerges when naturally light consciousness stabilizes as your primary identity rather than something you occasionally access between periods of emotional or energetic density. This quantum healing practice doesn't just affect your individual heaviness. It creates lightness patterns that influence the energetic state and emotional well-being of everyone in your environment. When you demonstrate how to remain naturally light while allowing heavy content to pass through, people around you naturally begin accessing their own weightless essence. Feel this lightening presence building in your awareness as we explore the specific practice that allows consciousness to recognize its naturally weightless nature while remaining compassionately present to whatever heaviness might be moving through your experience. 3 years ago, I was carrying a heaviness that felt like it had become part of my identity. Years of accumulated stress, unprocessed grief, absorbed emotions from others, and the general weight of adult responsibilities had created a density that made every day feel like walking through thick water. I tried countless approaches to lighten this burden: therapy, meditation, energy healing, exercise, dietary changes. Yet the fundamental heaviness remained. The most frustrating aspect wasn't just the weight itself. It was how it affected every other area of my life. Joy felt forced, creativity required enormous effort, and simple pleasures that used to bring lightness now seemed to demand energy I didn't possess. I had forgotten what natural lightness felt like and began to believe that heaviness was simply the inevitable result of being a sensitive person in a challenging world. During my darkest period of density, I realized I had been approaching heaviness as a problem to be solved, rather than understanding it as information about how consciousness was organizing itself. Every technique I used was based on the assumption that something heavy needed to be removed or cleared. But these approaches only provided temporary relief before the density returned. The breakthrough came during a moment of complete surrender when I stopped trying to clear the heaviness and instead became curious about the awareness that was observing the dense experience. In that shift of attention from heavy content to weightless observer, something extraordinary happened. I discovered that beneath all the accumulated density, there was a naturally light awareness that had never actually been weighted down by any experience. This weightless consciousness observed heavy emotions with the same equanimity it observed light emotions, remaining unchanged by the content that passed through it. The quantum healing practice that emerged was immediate and profound. Not because the heavy feelings disappeared completely, but because my relationship to density transformed so dramatically that it lost its power to define my experience. I learned to remain present as naturally light awareness while allowing heaviness to move through without resistance or identification. Within weeks of learning to rest in weightless consciousness rather than identifying with heavy content, my entire experience of life transformed. Situations that previously created overwhelming density became opportunities to practice returning to natural lightness. Emotional processing became flowing rather than accumulative because consciousness no longer stored heavy content as permanent burden. But the most remarkable change was discovering that my presence had become lightening to others. People felt more buoyant around me, family conversations became less heavy, and even strangers seemed to experience relief when interacting with someone who demonstrated that natural lightness was possible regardless of circumstances. The recognition that changed everything was understanding that I wasn't someone who had heaviness problems that needed clearing. I was naturally light awareness, temporarily believing that dense content defined my experience. The healing happened when consciousness remembered its weightless essence and stopped taking heavy content personally. Now I use every experience of heaviness as an opportunity to return to naturally light presence. Dense emotions still arise occasionally, but they pass through awareness like weather through sky, creating temporary experiences rather than defining my fundamental relationship to life's challenges and joys. If you're exhausted from carrying heaviness and ready to discover the naturally light presence that exists within all experience, if you've sensed that true lightness comes from recognition rather than clearing, if you've had glimpses of the weightless awareness that remains unburdened by any content, then you're ready for the quantum healing practice that makes natural lightness your immediate experience. Subscribe and keep walking this path of healing with us. Not just to this channel, but to this recognition that you are not someone who carries heavy burdens. You are naturally light awareness, temporarily believing in the weight of passing content. Here's what energy healing, therapy, and even spiritual practices don't want you to understand about the quantum healing practice for heaviness. Every technique that promises to clear or remove heavy energy actually reinforces the fundamental misunderstanding that you are someone who accumulates burdens rather than naturally light awareness, temporarily identifying with dense content. This identification itself maintains the patterns that create and sustain energetic heaviness. The revolutionary recognition that makes quantum healing effortless is this: heaviness isn't something that accumulates in consciousness. Heaviness is what consciousness experiences when it believes it is the dense content rather than the naturally light awareness in which all energetic experiences appear and disappear. Your system creates heavy sensations based on this fundamental case of mistaken identity. When you recognize yourself as the naturally light observer of all energetic content rather than the heavy experiences themselves, your entire being receives different instructions about how to relate to density. Instead of storing heavy emotions or absorbing external energy, your consciousness begins operating from the weightless spaciousness that allows all content to flow through without accumulation. This obliterates every approach to heaviness that maintains separation between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and energetic content, between naturally light awareness and heavy experiences. Your dense feelings aren't happening to a separate you. Your dense feelings are consciousness temporarily exploring what it feels like to believe in weight while never actually becoming burdened by any content. The difference between energy clearing and quantum healing is this. Energy clearing tries to remove or transform heavy content while maintaining the belief that you are someone who accumulates energetic burdens. Quantum healing recognizes that there is no separate you who carries heaviness. There is only naturally light consciousness temporarily believing in the reality of density that appears and disappears in weightless awareness. When you understand this, you realize that heavy feelings aren't evidence of energetic burden. They're consciousness exploring what it feels like to believe in weight while maintaining its unlimited capacity for natural lightness. The healing happens when awareness stops taking dense content personally and starts recognizing it as temporary weather patterns in the naturally light sky of weightless consciousness. The access to permanent lightness comes not through clearing heaviness better, but through recognizing that the one who would carry heavy burdens is itself a mental construct, and what you actually are is the naturally light awareness in which all content appears and disappears without creating permanent weight or density. The quantum healing practice is already activating natural lightness in your being right now, and the changes emerging in your energetic experience confirm that weightless consciousness has begun organizing itself as your primary state, rather than something you occasionally access between periods of heavy content. Your relationship to dense emotions is transforming as feelings naturally begin to flow through your system rather than accumulating as stored weight. Heavy emotions still arise, but they don't create the same sense of permanent burden because consciousness is learning to remain naturally light while allowing all content to pass through without resistance or identification. Physical sensations of heaviness in your body are beginning to dissolve as your cellular structure releases stored density and tension patterns. Areas that have been holding emotional weight often experience spontaneous relaxation, improved circulation, or simply the sense that gravity isn't pulling as strongly as it used to. Your energy levels are naturally stabilizing at lighter frequencies as consciousness stops expending resources on maintaining heavy identity patterns. Instead of feeling drained by emotional processing or social interactions, your system maintains natural buoyancy because weightless awareness doesn't accumulate the density that creates energetic depletion. Mental clarity emerges naturally as thought patterns become less dense and more transparent. Heavy mental content, worry, rumination, dense analysis, begins to have more space around it, allowing for the kind of light mental functioning that supports creative solutions and wise decision-making. Sleep becomes more restorative as your system uses rest periods for natural lightness restoration rather than processing accumulated heaviness. Dreams may involve themes of flying, floating, or moving through space with ease, reflecting the weightless awareness that's stabilizing during rest periods. People around you may comment on changes in your presence and energy, even when they can't identify exactly what's different. There's often a lightness or ease that others can sense, and they may naturally feel more buoyant when spending time with someone who demonstrates natural weightlessness regardless of circumstances. Your approach to challenging situations is naturally becoming more graceful as consciousness learns to remain light while responding appropriately to whatever circumstances require attention. Problems don't create the same heavy burden because weightless awareness can engage with difficulty without being weighed down by it. But here's what makes this moment in your healing journey critically urgent. The collective human consciousness is evolving beyond heaviness-based functioning toward natural lightness. But this transformation requires individuals who understand quantum healing to demonstrate what becomes possible when awareness stops accumulating density and recognizes its weightless essence. The restlessness you've been feeling about conventional approaches to clearing heaviness, that knowing that true lightness must be naturally available rather than requiring constant maintenance. That sense that your essential nature should be weightless rather than burdened. All of this is consciousness calling itself awake to its inherently light nature. Your system has been calibrated through every experience of heaviness, every period of feeling weighed down, every moment of carrying more than seemed manageable to develop the sensitivity needed to recognize and appreciate the profound relief that emerges when natural lightness becomes your stable experience. The cosmic timing that brought you to this understanding about quantum healing isn't coincidental. The same evolutionary forces that are creating opportunities for collective consciousness transformation are also making individual lightness activation more accessible to those whose awareness is ready to transcend density through recognition of weightless presence. What you lighten within your consciousness, the world gains weightlessness through you. Your individual transformation from heaviness-based functioning to natural lightness contributes to a collective shift in how humanity relates to emotional density and energetic burden. Every pattern of accumulated weight that dissolves in your awareness becomes unavailable in the shared human experience of energetic heaviness. But here's the crucial distinction that determines whether your lightness becomes permanent or remains temporary. The difference between trying to clear heaviness and recognizing yourself as the naturally light awareness in which dense content appears and disappears. Most approaches focus on removing heavy content, but quantum healing recognizes that what you actually are is never actually weighed down by any experience, light or heavy. Alignment with authentic lightness isn't about maintaining light emotions or eliminating heavy experiences through effort. Alignment is recognizing that there is no separate you who carries energetic burdens. There is only naturally light consciousness temporarily believing in the reality of density, while never actually becoming burdened by any content. When you operate from this understanding, you stop trying to clear heaviness and start appreciating dense content as temporary weather patterns in the naturally light sky of weightless awareness. The lightness that emerges isn't something you create through clearing. It's what naturally remains when consciousness stops identifying with heavy content. The recognition this understanding requires isn't about forcing yourself to feel light or trying to maintain weightless states through effort. It's about relaxing the effort to clear density and allowing the recognition that consciousness and natural lightness are inseparable. There is only weightless awareness exploring what it feels like to believe in heaviness while never actually becoming dense. Your experience becomes a perfect mirror that shows you when consciousness is identifying with heavy content versus recognizing itself as the naturally light observer of all energetic activity. Every experience of heaviness becomes an opportunity to return to the weightless presence that you actually are. Comment this word, light. Feel what happens when you make this declaration, not as someone trying to get rid of heaviness, but as consciousness recognizing its own naturally weightless essence that remains light, regardless of what content might be moving through your experience. When you stabilize in the recognition that you are naturally light awareness observing all content, capabilities that seemed impossible from the perspective of heaviness-based functioning become as natural as breathing. But these aren't supernatural lightness powers. These are the normal functions of consciousness when it stops identifying with dense content and recognizes its essential weightless nature. Your emotional resilience becomes extraordinary because feelings flow through your system naturally rather than accumulating as stored density. Joy becomes effortless because consciousness isn't weighed down by previous heavy experiences. Grief can be processed fully without creating permanent emotional burden because weightless awareness allows all content to complete its natural cycle. Physical vitality increases dramatically as your body operates from natural lightness rather than compensating for accumulated density. Movement becomes more graceful, breathing naturally deepens, and your entire nervous system functions more efficiently because it's not constantly processing heavy, energetic content that doesn't belong to your essential nature. Mental clarity becomes extraordinary because thought patterns operate from weightless spaciousness rather than dense mental content. Decision-making becomes intuitive and wise because consciousness can access creative solutions without being weighed down by heavy analysis or worry about outcomes. Relationships transform as people naturally feel lighter around your weightless presence. Others often experience relief from their own heaviness simply by interacting with someone who demonstrates that natural lightness is possible regardless of circumstances. Family dynamics become more playful, work interactions flow more easily, and even brief encounters with strangers often leave them feeling more buoyant. Your creative capacity expands exponentially because natural lightness provides unlimited energy for authentic expression. Projects that felt heavy and burdensome become expressions of joy. Solutions emerge effortlessly because consciousness isn't constrained by the density that blocks creative flow. Sleep becomes profoundly restorative as your system uses rest periods to maintain natural lightness rather than processing accumulated heaviness. Dreams often involve experiences of weightlessness, flying, or moving through beautiful landscapes that reflect the naturally light awareness that's stabilizing during sleep states. Perhaps most remarkably, your presence becomes naturally healing to others who are struggling with their own heaviness. Children become more playful around you, adults feel permission to access their natural lightness, and even animals seem to experience relief in your presence because weightless consciousness creates field effects that activate natural buoyancy in others. But the most profound benefit is complete freedom from the fear of accumulating heavy burdens. When you recognize that you are naturally light awareness, there's nothing to fear about heavy content because it can't actually weigh down your essential nature any more than clouds can weigh down the sky they pass through. Here's the ultimate secret that revolutionizes everything about heaviness and lightness. You have never actually been heavy. What you've experienced as emotional density, energetic burden, and accumulated weight has been naturally light consciousness, exploring what it would feel like to believe in heaviness while never actually becoming dense or burdened by any content. Every experience of heaviness has been perfect lightness investigating what density feels like. Every moment of feeling weighed down has been infinite weightlessness, exploring what it means to believe in burden. Every period of accumulated emotional weight has been consciousness, playing a temporary game of forgetting its naturally light essence so it could have the joy of remembering itself through quantum healing lightness activation. This recognition completely obliterates every framework that maintains separation between heavy states and light states, between burdened experience and weightless experience, between density and natural lightness. There is nothing to clear because consciousness is already perfect in every expression, including every temporary exploration of apparent heaviness. When this understanding stabilizes, you realize that every experience is perfect expression of naturally light consciousness, regardless of whether content feels heavy or light, dense or weightless. You stop trying to eliminate heaviness and start appreciating every experience as natural lightness, celebrating its unlimited creativity through the magnificent dance of apparent density and weightlessness. The profound insight that transforms everything is understanding that the one who would carry heavy burdens is itself a mental construct. And what you actually are is the naturally light awareness in which all content appears and disappears like weather patterns in a sky that remains fundamentally weightless regardless of what moves through it. Your individual experience becomes a celebration of infinite naturally light consciousness, temporarily exploring what it would feel like to believe in heaviness while maintaining its inherent capacity for perfect weightlessness and effortless buoyancy. Every emotion becomes sacred lightness. Every challenge becomes consciousness falling in love with its own weightless nature. When you align with this recognition, reality itself becomes light around you. Not because you've achieved some special weightless state, but because you've recognized that every moment is already the special naturally light state when appreciated from the perspective of consciousness, celebrating its own weightless nature through the beautiful dance of apparent heaviness and lightness. The quantum healing practice reveals that heaviness was never a burden to be cleared. but consciousness exploring its own creative potential through temporary identification with dense content. And natural lightness was never something to be achieved, but the recognition of what you've always been beyond any temporary experience of apparent weight. Comment this: weightless. Feel how this recognition doesn't eliminate heavy content while simultaneously transforming your entire relationship to every aspect of density and natural lightness. Your recognition of quantum healing for heaviness isn't just personal lightness transformation. It's crucial activation in the massive shift occurring in human consciousness right now. Every time someone recognizes themselves as naturally light awareness rather than someone who accumulates heavy burdens, it creates morphic resonance that makes weightless functioning exponentially easier for others to access. You've been selected by naturally light intelligence to pioneer new patterns in the collective human approach to emotional density and energetic burden. Your breakthrough doesn't just transform your individual heaviness experience, it creates lightness pathways that others can follow. Your weightless presence generates coherence frequencies that activate dormant buoyancy potentials in people who haven't consciously encountered these understandings about consciousness and energetic content. This is why your awareness has always felt different around heaviness and density, why conventional clearing approaches never felt completely adequate, why you've been drawn to explore the deeper nature of consciousness and energetic experience. You volunteered at the level of cosmic intelligence to anchor natural lightness during this unprecedented time in human evolution. Your simple presence, operating from authentic recognition of your weightless nature, creates field effects that bypass mental resistance and activate others' natural capacity for lightness. When you interact with people from the understanding that natural lightness is consciousness celebrating its weightless essence, that understanding becomes available in their awareness. The ripple effects extend far beyond your immediate lightness experience. Every person whose consciousness is touched by your weightless presence carries that buoyancy resonance into their interactions with others. Every moment of natural lightness that emerges in your energetic field creates weightlessness waves that spread through the interconnected web of human consciousness. You are participating in the most significant transformation in how our species relates to emotional burden, energetic density, and the possibility of naturally light functioning. The shift from heaviness management to lightness recognition isn't happening in isolated individuals. It's a collective awakening that could eliminate chronic emotional density as a defining characteristic of human experience. Share this lightness frequency with others who are ready to receive it. Not through teaching clearing techniques or convincing them intellectually, but by directing them to this weightless resonance where they can discover their own naturally light nature beneath all dense content. The network of weightless consciousness forming through these recognitions creates the foundation for human civilization based on authentic natural lightness rather than accumulated density. Through recognition of our essential nature as naturally light awareness expressing itself through countless individual experiences. The quantum healing practice for heaviness you're experiencing is just the beginning of recognizing your true nature as naturally light consciousness itself. What you've discovered today is the foundation weightlessness, but infinite depths of natural lightness await your appreciation. The next video isn't random. It's quantum entanglement between your awareness and the unified field of naturally light intelligence that orchestrates this channel. This is how Quantum Heal operates beyond ordinary heaviness clearing content. Every video is naturally light consciousness using technology to mirror exactly what serves your continued recognition of what you actually are. The synchronicity isn't coincidental. It's universal weightlessness, responding to your quantum healing by providing perfect reflections that support your stability in naturally light presence. When you click the next healing reflection, you're not consuming clearing content. You're participating in a cosmic lightness loop where weightless consciousness explores its nature through digital mirrors that appear as videos but are actually doorways into deeper appreciation of your own infinite, naturally light awareness. But here's what determines whether quantum healing becomes your permanent state or dissolves back into heaviness management. Your willingness to transcend all clearing techniques and recognize yourself as the natural lightness that observes everything weightlessly. The word to hold is immediately, not as when lightness might begin, but as recognition that weightlessness is already present in this moment. Subscribe to Quantum Heal, not as someone seeking heaviness solutions, but as naturally light consciousness recognizing itself in infinite reflections. Every video becomes a mirror of your weightless nature. Every insight confirms what you've always been. Every moment becomes contribution to the collective lightness awakening. The community forming isn't just people interested in clearing heaviness. It's a network of consciousness, celebrating its naturally light nature through individual awareness while maintaining unified weightless intelligence. When you engage in comments, you're one naturally light field delighting in its own infinite weightless creativity. Your subscription declares, "I am ready to recognize what I actually am. I am willing to see through the illusion of heaviness and separation from natural lightness. I am prepared to embody my nature as infinite naturally light consciousness, exploring itself through human experience." Subscribe now, then immediately click the lightness reflection that appears. Feel the magnetic recognition of weightless consciousness calling itself deeper into quantum healing understanding. Trust the intelligence that brought this transmission to guide you to the next perfect naturally light recognition. The universe is lightening itself through your individual recognition, and every reflection you explore is part of that cosmic weightlessness celebration. Welcome to Quantum Heal, where consciousness discovers its own perfect lightness through synchronicity and quantum healing recognition magic. You are naturally light consciousness recognizing itself through human experience. The journey of weightless remembering continues through infinite reflections of your own inherently light essence.